We often begin the session by asking our guests to share your own background, particularly how you encountered the Buddha nature teachings and from whom you got these teachings the first time, if you have any memories and the first time impressions you had. So if you can share a bit so the audience knows your background and from where you're approaching.
Thank you, Kamala, and thank you, Marcus, for hosting us, and thank you to Tatra for organizing these wonderful broadcasts on the nature of the mind, something that makes me very, very happy to see the website and the whole, all the effort, which is something that, of course, as you understand, is something that has been a very important in my life. Ever since I met Tibetan Buddhism, I was 16 years old at the time that I came into contact with Tibetan Buddhism in Copenhagen, Denmark. And at this time, the 16th Karmapa came with a large entourage of high Rinpoches and lamas. In fact, a whole bus full of lamas were traveling around Europe in 77 and visiting, spending 2 weeks in Denmark. And this is when I first met the 16th Karmapa. And he brought with him Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche, Tenga Rinpoche, Khenpo Tulsim Gyamtso Rinpoche, and many other high lamas. So this was a fantastic time for us. The year before that, as you mentioned, Marcus, I met Carlo Rinpoche in Caduling in France, where he came to give the initiations for the first 3-year retreat. At this time, I just turned 17 and I didn't know anything about Tibetan Buddhism, so it was all very mystical to me at the time. But it was enough for me to realize that this is the path that I wanted to follow. We were some at the time who had started to suspect that the world around us was a description that we had inherited to a large degree from people around us. And we were young people who were looking for, meaning of life. And also we were inspired by ideas that the world is whatever we perceive it to be. We were not really subscribing to very mainstream versions of reality, if you can say like that. We were some who were reading books like Carlos Castaneda, which showed how you can access other levels of reality. And he was, receiving some kind of training from a shaman who showed him how to stop the world, how to see, and how to, perform different things that actually seems now, in retrospect, to be very similar to some sort of yogic conduct. However, we were not, able to really follow up on this in any way that was very, what can I say? We were looking for teachers, basically. Mm-hmm. So when the Karmapa came with these realized masters, who all had very overpowering presence of, of realization, when we entered into their presence, we were immediately hit by the fact that they had such a pure perception of the world. And they even had pure perceptions of us, which were even more surprising. So this was a very strong, I could say we perceived, or we were able to meet somebody who was already resting in the nature of the mind and thereby embodying Buddha nature, if I may say it like that. So then this was enough for me to kind of stop any other education, and I started to study Tibetan because I wanted to learn where did this come from, because it was a very valid path. It was a very reasoned and structured path that was being presented to us of how we could perceive the purity around us and thereby transform, as a way of transforming our own mind. It was, it was shown to be a completely valid path that could be followed, and a stable path, as opposed to other ways of trying to access other realities which weren't very stable. So here was a very structured path that one could follow. So then the 16th Karmapa, he then entrusted the Khenpo Tulsim Gyaltsen Rinpoche to educate translators for the purpose of, spreading Buddhism in the Western countries. And so I was lucky enough to join this first course in 78, which took place in Dordogne in France. And here we started to study. The first text that was studied was the Uttara Tantra Shastra. So that we had already heard from the teachings the Khenpo gave when the Karmapa was there about the cause is the Buddha nature, from Gampopa's Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So this became like the motivation for our whole spiritual path. It became this knowledge that you had a Buddha nature. And so then when we started to study it in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, this was actually very surprising that it was being taught to us who were like very much beginners. When you consider that the Uttara Tantra Shastra is mostly studied after like maybe 10 years of full-time studies in the traditional Shidras, the monastic universities in Tibet and the Himalayan region. So why did he teach that to us as complete beginners at this time? We were like struggling with just spelling our way through, some of the highest teachings available. And this was a surprising choice. So I would like to return to this point. Why did he teach this to us as like total beginners?
Yeah, I suppose, it's amazing, of course, that you had these fantastic masters who you encountered, and then you even had the opportunity to study the ultimate continuum, Julama, with Khenchen Situm Gyatso. But it must be partly because the Kagyu tradition, as you pointed out through Gampopa's citation, that they sort of, not only the Kagyu, in fact, even the Nyingma, they sort of take the ground, the Buddha nature as the beginning, the basis from where the spiritual training has to begin. So that could be one reason why you are exposed to such an advanced topic quite early on. Do you think that's the case? If you went to a Gelugpa master or some other Buddhist master, you would have probably got some other teachings to begin with.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yeah.
So for me, it was basically the first teaching that I kind of encountered.
And when you encountered such teachings, Buddha nature, the ultimate continuum, it presents a rather sort of absolutist approach to Buddhist teachings. Some people even allege that it is bringing the theory of self into Buddhism in some disguise. Did it sort of surprise you that a Buddhist system which normally denies any sort of substantial existence, which denies the existence of self, and here you are beginning with this text and teaching that deals with something that's real?
Well, Khenpo Rinpoche never let us believe in a personal individual self. So for me, there was not really any doubt that there could be any kind of confusion about that point, even though, of course, the terminology that is being used, it can, I think if you had not been guided by the oral tradition, you may make some misunderstandings, even though they say it is a transcendental sort of self. So even in the vocabulary, there's, I don't think, for me, it was never really an issue. And honestly, even if I might be jumping a little bit too far into any discussion about this, honestly, I feel that sometimes the what you call it, not attacks, but the polemics about this from the Tibetan side of it, I think sometimes that it is really based on a misunderstanding of what really is meant. Like when I see masters like the Maharshi and who represent the Indian tradition, I don't see any evidence of a personal self being really upfront anywhere. As it's like, so it's an interesting and very long discussion.
Yeah.